When I thought about what topics I could share with you guys today, I got advice from a friend. And my friend said, talk about something you love, something you're really passionate about. I thought, okay, everybody says that, but I know if it's something that I really love, I can talk about yoga. And my friend looked at me like this. That's not gonna work. This is an innovation conference. Gotta talk about something relevant. So then I thought, okay, next biggest on the passion list is food. I can talk about food. And then he was like, that's definitely not gonna work. So this was me, and I looked at the audience and the companies who were gonna be here today, and I noticed that actually the majority of the companies who are here are companies who we've actually been studying and looking up to and trying to emulate as DBS. So that's when I really looked like this. I was like, this is not gonna work. What could I possibly tell this group that you haven't heard of already or that you don't already do? So I don't know if Max knew this when he invited us, but I thought I'd talk about my own personal experience at DBS, right? That's probably the best thing I can share. But like Tom said, DBS came from a very different place. So actually 10 years ago, this is what I don't know if you knew, this is actually where we were as DBS. And no joke. So compared to, these are some of our biggest competitors in Asia. And in 2008 and 9, everyone was going up, and we were actually the only ones that were going down when it came to customer experience and customer satisfaction. So imagine just being in this place, right? We're a development bank of Singapore, supposed to be a leader in the region, and this is where we were. So I actually have a question for the audience, because one of the things I thought about before I came here is, who's even gonna know who DBS is? I know that here I'm showing you where we are against our competitors, but how many of you know who DBS is? Okay, maybe just a handful. And when Tom said Development Bank of Singapore, did that help? Nope. Yeah, that's what I thought. So I also, when I lived and worked in London, I had no idea who DBS was. So what made DBS a little bit more special and actually put it on a map a little bit, even though a lot of people today still don't know who we are, but in Southeast Asia, DBS is actually one of the largest bank in Southeast Asia, but not as well known outside. So it went from this position that you see to what Tom was talking about today, just earlier, which is we've been named the best bank in the world this year, and for a couple of years, the best digital bank in the world. And most recently, also the most innovative bank. And this was all actually quite surprising and unexpected for us, because if you talk to a lot of people who are working there, most of us will say we still have a long way to go. But nevertheless, this was a pretty dramatic shift for DBS. So it went from being a bank that helped to develop Singapore to what it is today for about 50 years, to launching a digital bank across the region in Southeast Asia over 2.5 years. And in that space of time, we increased our total customer base by 1/3. So this is pretty dramatic for DBS. And I thought about, what is it that caused this shift? And one of the first things that I noticed when I joined DBS, I joined about 4.5 years ago, is that they really weren't afraid to take risks to do the right thing. And this is probably the first thing that struck me. So when we started building Digital Bank, DBS said, we're actually going to leave everything that we know behind. So all of the products and services, the customers that we had, the experiences that we had built, we left all of that behind. And we set up a separate office just for Digital Bank with a separate team. And this is pretty scary, because DBS had it already. They had all of their products and services, but it just wasn't working, right? So they decided to start something new and start from designing from a blank sheet of paper. So we didn't take any of what we had existing in any of the markets where DBS did have a presence. So Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan is where we were already. And the other aspect of this is that when we started Digital Bank, DBS said, well, which market, right? That was the next big question. And we were already present in a few markets, but we wanted to tackle new ones. And if you think about it, 40% of the world's population lives in 3 countries. And DBS decided to go into those with a purely digital product in places where nobody knew us. So the first one we tackled, the first one we went into was India. And nobody knew who we were in India. Even today, a lot more people do know us, and we have 2.2 million customers in India today. But at the time, we had 12 branches in the whole country, and we didn't have a brand. Nobody knew us. So there's a lot that we could talk about there, and this was a pretty complex journey. But I thought that I could share 3 topics with you today. So one is customer, about the customer and how they do care, but they just don't care about us as banks. 2 is data, and how we hear a lot about data today, and it's a buzzword and big topic these days, but it's powerful in the right circumstances. So what I mean by that is I'll talk a little bit about what we found worked for us when it comes to data. And 3rd is hiring, and how it can be reinvented to create a different kind of team and a different kind of culture. So on the first topic, the customer. Yeah, so this was probably one of the first realizations that we had as DBS, where the customer does not care about banking, right? They don't care about banks either. So we basically have, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, today is the day that I'm gonna do my banking. Can't wait to fill out that mortgage application that's been sitting on my desk for a month, take it to a branch and stand there for 2 hours, right? So we kind of came to looked at ourselves in the mirror as a bank, and we said, we've got this box of, I won't say a bad word, but stuff that we have to offer, right? Products and services that we can offer as a bank. And then we have the customers like all the way over here with what the customer really cares about. And what does the customer really care about is life and living, right? So the food that you eat every day, the travel that you do, your job, your kids, your family, that's what customers care about. So there was this huge gap when we started Digital Bank, and we're like, how can we bridge this gap? Like, it's different to a lot of other companies, for example, that are here, like a Lego or a Nike, where you have a product that people actually are motivated and want to go out and buy, right? Or they want to go to your shop and check it out. But in banking, nobody wants to do that. So you probably have challenges that we don't. But this was a specific challenge to banking, in that we have all of this stuff that's just obligatory kind of list of to-dos that nobody wants to get to. So what we did as Digital Bank is the first thing that we did is we went out to talk to customers. So these are just a few photos from our early days in Digital Bank in India when we went to Mumbai to talk to customers. And actually, I imagine that a lot of you in the audience are thinking, well, that's pretty obvious. We've been doing that for years. But for a bank, this is very unusual. And we had never done it before. So this was one of the first things that kind of changed the way that DBS worked. And when we talked, the more that we talked to customers and the more that we went out there and experimented, we found that the answer to this gap lies in really money. So customers care about what money enables them to do, all of those things in your life. And that is what really connected what we could offer and what customers cared about. So this is from this and from these conversations that we had with customers on the street is where we came up with something called Live More, Bank Less. And this has become actually a slogan for DBS. And in the beginning, it was not really very well understood, and people didn't really buy it. But after a while, it actually sunk in, and then it just took off. So now it's hard to actually see DBS's name without this, and it's difficult to find someone in Singapore who hasn't seen this. So this is kind of shaping what we do today, which is we want to help you over here, which is how can you live more and bank less. So I thought I'd share with you also an example of live more, bank less. And one of the first journeys that we designed when we started Digital Bank in India is the sign-up experience, so opening an account. And this was, oh, I think I went ahead too far. This is just a snapshot of that journey, of the sign-up experience. And what was funny is, so in this, you could open an account in 90 seconds, and you didn't have to sign any papers or go into a branch or bring any documents with you. But what was funny is that when we took this out to test in India, so I remember I took it out for the first time when we had a working prototype, and 90% of the feedback that we heard from our customers is, I mean, they actually weren't customers at that stage because we had 0 customers. So 90% of the feedback we heard from people is, well, where's the rest of it? We were like, you've just opened a bank account. You have a bank account. And they were like, I have? So they didn't really see it, and they didn't really believe it, actually. This was the funny thing, is they didn't believe that they didn't have to go to a branch and stand there for 2 hours, that they didn't have to sign anything, and that they didn't have to bring any of their documents with them. So then we had a different challenge, which was how to get people to believe that this was really the experience. So we found that it was really through these conversations, talking to our customers and giving them this experience to actually go through, that they started believing. It was only when they actually started going through it that they started believing. So this was I would say, getting out there and talking to customers and getting out of the office was probably one of the big game changers for DBS. Now the next topic I'll talk about is data and how it's powerful in the right circumstances. So when I think about our journey with data and Digital Bank and DBS, what comes to mind is this guy, Clark Kent. And not because he's a superhero or because he's a very likable character, but more because of his backstory. So Clark Kent's actual name is Kal-El, and he comes from a planet called Krypton, where he's actually a normal guy, right? And he gets shipped off to planet Earth by his parents to do the right thing. And he went through a lot of struggles, right? So he had to hide his identity every day, and he had to go to a job and pretend that he's a human and learn how to be a human, right? Live in an apartment. And I think that was very hard for him, but in the right circumstances, his power was pretty tremendous on Earth. So the reason why this makes me think of our journey with data is that it was a very uncertain place to begin with. So when we started, we had no customers, right? And we had no data. And we didn't know what would work when it comes to data. We had a lot of questions, and we had what we thought was the right thing to do, but we had no idea if it was going to work. So we imagined things like, what if all of our data for all of our Digital Bank customers was in one place? And what if everyone had access to data and we didn't have a central business analytics team? And what if everybody could see the same top line numbers for a Digital Bank every single day? And what if we could do data without reporting, without the daily manual reporting? So these were all questions that we didn't have the answers to, but they kind of formed our vision for data. And it was a pretty scary place to be because we really didn't know if that was going to work. And there was a lot of resistance and people not really believing if it was going to work. So the journey, though, to get to that vision, we did manage to do all of those things, but the journey to get there was a very different story. And I can tell you in reality, what it actually felt like is this. It was hard. And for a long time, it was sometimes easier to just go the other way and give people the data that they wanted, the reports that they wanted with lots of data that they don't look at or don't make decisions based on. But we stuck with it. And what we found is the impact of that was quite powerful because we found that people were actually answering their own questions. So, simple questions like, how many customers do we have today? What's our gender ratio? What are women doing versus men doing on the app? These types of questions people could actually answer themselves without having to go to a central team to get that data. So what was happening is that people were solving problems that we didn't even know needed solving. And the impact of that is it gave us time. So it freed up actually my team. People were no longer coming to me or my team to ask for data. They were instead doing it themselves, and it freed us up to solve much more complex problems for a digital bank. So the next topic I'll talk about is hiring and team and how this can be reinvented. So this is the last topic, but it's probably the one that's closest to my heart, in that the team that I'm working in today, this is not them, by the way, representative, but they're probably the most the most tight-knit and high-performing team that I've ever been a part of. And it wasn't always that way. So we started with only 3 people. And in the beginning, we decided to try a few things differently when it comes to hiring. And one of the first things we did is, and I think we got this idea from Google, because I know they do this, is that every single person in the team interviews or speaks to or meets anybody who we're considering on hiring. So what that does is, if and when that person does come in, they know that every single person in the room has said, yes, they want you to be there. And that means that when that person has an issue or a challenge, they have no problem actually reaching out to the team around them for help. So it creates a very integrated team. Now, this is also difficult, because if you can imagine, put yourself in your 25-year-old shoes, maybe some people are 25 years old, you might be there interviewing someone who's 45 years old or 50, right? So this is a challenge, and some of the members, the more junior members in our team, were really not very comfortable with that in the beginning. So a lot of them came to us and said, I've never interviewed before, and I don't think I can do this. I don't know what kind of input you're going to have from me, because it won't be much. But that wasn't really the point. So the point was to have everybody in the team feel responsible for who we let into the team and feel that they have a voice and a say in who comes in. The other thing that we tried to do a little bit differently is bring people into the office. So I'll tell you a little story about how I landed in DBS in the first place. So I landed there 4.5 years ago, and I had a meeting with a guy who was starting digital bank at that time. And he said, I was looking for a job, and he said to me, why don't you just come into the office for a day? I was like, oh, that's a little strange, but I'll try. So I was like, okay, I'm open to it. So I went in. And part of the reason for this was, in that meeting, he was telling me all the things that they were doing differently as digital bank and DBS. And I knew DBS as the organization, and I knew that they were big and slow, right? But here was this guy telling me all these bright, shiny things that they were doing, and the office that they were in, and how they were going out and talking to customers, building something from scratch. And all of the time he was telling me this, I was sitting there like, I don't believe you. So this actually worked. So he said, why don't you come in? I went in for a day. And one day turned into 2 days, and 2 days turned into 5 days. And in the end, I was there, worked there for 5 days. I wasn't getting paid, but I was just exploring the environment and learning how they work. So he gave me 3 topics to work on and said, choose one that you think you can do. So I did that, and that's what I worked on for the 5 days. And at the end of the 5 days, I was sold, actually. And that's because I could see and I could feel and I could breathe the difference, right? So I could see how it was a very different office to the main office. I could see people getting up and talking to each other and solving problems together. I could see people designing something from scratch that they had never done before. So now that's kind of become a standard, and we do that with people who we bring in. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what's next. Actually, before I do that, I think I have about 5 minutes left. So I'll tell you a little story that we've done with hiring, most recently actually. So we were looking at CVs. We were hiring about 3 roles at the same time a while ago, and we were kind of inundated with CVs. And we looked at it at one point and we thought, this CV thing is not working for us anymore. Like, we've been doing CVs the same way for decades, right? You can write anything you want in your CV. You can't really tell what kind of person you are from your CV. So we decided to try something different, and we wrote this little questionnaire, which has a couple of multiple choice questions and a few free text questions. And they were specifically designed to find things that we were looking for in our team. And we implemented that a couple of months ago, and what it did is it cut our CV screening by about 40%. So instead of reviewing 100 CVs, we were reviewing 60 questionnaires, which had a lot more meat in them because these were specifically designed to tackle some of the questions that we're looking at. So that's another aspect of hiring. Now, I guess the question now is, what's next for us? And this is a question that we're actually tackling right now. So digital has gone fairly well for us, even though we're still building it. We're still launching new products and features every couple of months. But the question is, what's next? So I've been put in charge of figuring that out, and not a very comfortable place to be at all. It's actually a pretty scary place to be, but because it's very ambiguous and pretty nerve-wracking and quite frankly a bit lonely. But we don't know if it'll be worth it. We hope it will be, we'll find out. But where we think the answer to that lies is going back to that live more, bank less. So we've done digital, and all of our customers at the moment, even though we've designed some great digital experiences, all of our customers are still experiencing exactly the same thing, right? So what we're looking at now is how can we use all the data that we have about you. So, we collect 2,500 attributes about our customers every single day. So how can we use that in a smarter way to really design experiences that are catered to you as an individual? So that's what we're looking at right now in terms of what's next. So I'll leave you with just a few thoughts on some of the topics that I've spoken about today. So customer, get close to the customer and find and solve their jobs to be done. 2 is design from scratch when you really want to do something different. Take risks. Make data available to people and see what happens. Might actually surprise you. And reinvent hiring to find a different kind of talent and build a different kind of culture. And the last thought I'll leave you with is, in all of this talk of live more, bank less, and finding out what really matters to people, I thought I'd leave you with a brutally honest thought about myself, which is, this is why I do yoga. Thank you, and I'll take some questions now.